Once again, good morning and welcome you all to this national webinar on medical education. The topic for today's webinar is academic leadership and academic integrity in medical schools, presented by Dr. Geethanjali Padmanabhan. Before I call our speaker, I would like to just share a few background information why we chose this topic for this today's webinar. As we all know that, and it is a known fact, the thoughts and actions of a leader in an academic institution influences the thoughts and action of its stakeholders. In our case, it is the students, doctors and other healthcare workers. Similarly, the academic integrity of any academic leader contributes for the institutional building. So, both these academic leadership and academic integrity contributes for the organizational shaping and the shaping of organizational culture of any academic institution. So, in the backdrop of this, we have selected this topic including these two concepts. So, our speaker will be sharing her thoughts on both these concepts, that is academic leadership and academic integrity. About our speaker, Dr. Geethanjali needs no introduction. Still it is my duty and it is the customary that being a host I have to introduce her. Dr. Geethanjali is currently the director of AIIMS Bhubaneswar, and she has held various positions, administrative positions in JIPMER, including head of the Department of Medical Education and head of the Department of Pharmacology. She has also held technical positions in WHO in the preparation of essential drugs and medicines, and like any other reputed academic leader, she has a good number of publications and research grants. Above all, she is a good role model for many of the students and faculty across the nation and other places. Okay. With this short introduction, I now invite Dr. Geethanjali, Madam Geethanjali, to share her thoughts and deliver her presentation. Welcome, ma'am.
So, good morning everyone, and thank you Dr. Jayaprakash Rajan and Professor Rakesh Agarwal, Director of JIPMER, for inviting me here on this webinar to share with all of you some of my thoughts on academic leadership and academic integrity in medical schools. As Dr. Jayaprakash Rajan has said, I think this is an important topic and one which we do not much discuss in public. So, thank you for inviting me, and I am actually very happy to be here. If you have any questions, you can please put into your chat box, or you can ask me after the talk. So, I will start with this question: is a leader a person or a position? Now, people who are selected for certain positions of leadership, like AIIMS or JIPMER or any of the medical colleges, we fulfill a position and we are expected to lead. Okay, but then you might ask me that there are books, and the present knowledge about leadership is that you actually don't need a title to be leader. We are seeing teenage leaders who are emerging. So, and if I look at myself and my own academic progression over the years or maybe decades, I know that I have acted as a leader should, even when I was a senior resident or maybe an assistant professor. So, especially for those of you who are in academic positions, I would say you don't need to need a title to be a leader. You don't need to have a position of leadership to call yourself a leader. So, this is a favorite quote of mine by Zig Ziglar, and it is very self-explanatory. I don't have to say more about this. Just keep this in your mind. Okay. So, this is a question which we are often asked: are doctors held to a higher standards of integrity than other positions? Right? It might be a business magnate, or it might be a politician, but we are, yes, we are held to higher standards of integrity. And why is that? Because patients and public need to be able to place their trust in us, because we take decisions regarding another person's health. So we are to held to a higher standard of integrity. Now, why is this? Because from long time back, centuries ago, the contract medicine has had with society is a social contract. It is not a business contract. It is a social contract. And mainly it is an implicit one. Yes, nowadays with the so-called and things like that, it is becoming more and more explicit. But by and large, it is an implicit contract medicine has with society. And therefore, because trust is the central pillar of the practice of medicine, integrity plays a very high role in framing the character of a doctor. So we cannot remove the integrity part from the entire training, academic training or academic leadership which we put forth in this whole in context. So we need to know this because trust is the central pillar of the practice of medicine. Okay. So how I'm going to do this is I've already spoken to you about the first one. We look a little bit about the requisites for academic leadership. What is the difference between a scientific institution like IIT and medical institutions? What is the definition of academic integrity? What are the challenges faced by the leadership of medical colleges in order so that they can address the issues of dishonesty and fraud in various issues? So what ails academic leadership and what we are doing right wrong? This is approximately what I'm going to talk to you about. So what are the requisites for academic leadership? Many of you may be familiar with this name, Indra Nooyi. She's a former PepsiCo CEO and a person whom I admire very much. She came up with this 5C models for leader. And this model was for leaders, but I would say that it is the same for academic leadership also. You need to be competent. And when I say competent, not just in administration or anything else, you need to be competent in your own specialty. Only if you are competent in your own specialty will you be respected by your peers. You will be respected by those who are working for you, your students. So competence is key to this. Something went wrong. Okay, so competence is key to this, okay? Second is courage and confidence. It's not enough if a leader has just the courage, but the leader has to have the confidence to go on. So it is a twin thing. A leader needs to have good communication skills, not just to speak with their own people, but also to talk with the public at large, with students, with parents. This is absolutely essential to have good communication skills, not just speaking, but also written communication skills. The leader has to be consistent, and of course, she or he has to have a moral compass which leads due north, points due north. So these are 5 requisites for academic leadership. Now, effective leadership is crucial to any educational organization, not necessarily medical college. It might be even a play school, it might be a kindergarten, or it might be a arts college. Effective leadership is the single most important deciding factor in making something mediocre or something very, very good. So, leading a medical institution is very different from leading a purely educational institution, or even having institutions like IIT or IIMs or NITs and so on. And this is because healthcare is extremely complex. Therefore, teaching medical students, whether it is undergraduates or postgraduates or nursing students, teaching them to care for patients becomes more complicated than if you are teaching them to do mathematics or engineering or cut up something or architecture or something like that. there is also a lot of community engagement which goes on. So the challenges of somebody leading a medical institution is very different and far more complex than somebody who is leading an ordinary college. Now, because of this, very little time is actually spent for the academics of an institution. Most of the people in leadership positions don't spend much time, reviewing the curriculum, seeing how teaching learning can be improved, seeing what is going wrong. That kind of activity takes up very little time, because most of the time we believe, okay, if something is being done, let it continue. Let's not change or upset the ship, so to say. So very little time is spent for academics, very little money is spent for academics, whereas it doesn't. Academics generally gets a very a stepmotherly treatment. Nobody spends much time for it, because there are other important things which a leader should worry about. Even if you are dean, you don't worry much about academics. All the time you are thinking about giving leave to somebody or conducting some exam which takes up all your time. Okay, so that's the whole problem. So if you look at the differences between a purely scientific institution or scientific educational institution and a medical one, many of the engineering colleges, you will find that engineers are trained after they join. So they will join Infosys or Tata TCS or something like that. They train these people. After they get a BTech or MTech degree, they are trained. Okay. And there is a lot of flexibility. And an architect might become, go and work in a, car manufacturing unit. Might have an IIT engineer who starts writing books. A lot of flexibility. But in medicine, we expect our students to start working from the day they pass out. If you are a final year student, next day you are an intern, you are expected to go to OPD, see cases, work in the labor room, and all that kind of thing. So you are expected to be fully trained when you finish your subject or your course. Mistakes do not often translate into human tragedy, because at a lower level they are not given much choice. Yes, sometimes the flyovers break, bridges break down, and all that happen. But in medicine, potential for mistakes to become human tragedies, loss of life, loss of limb, is quite high. Teachers are generally well trained in other institutions. Here we know teachers are not trained. This is not true now, because MCI has done an excellent job in training people, and so have other people. So nowadays, medical teachers are much better trained. There is no social contract with public, as I have told you, and medicine they have. And of course, faculty are expected to teach and at the most do research in many of these colleges. But in medical college, faculty are expected to teach, see patients, do research, corporate responsibility, all kinds of things. So there is a lot of pressure on faculty to perform and do varied things. The skill set has to be extremely varied. So you can imagine somebody in a leadership, even a head of the department, has to ensure that all his faculty are doing so many other things. So if you are talking of leadership position, you need to look at how are people selected for positions of leadership in medical institutions. If you are in a government institution, as I am, normally there will be an advertisement and they will choose you depending on your standing in a particular subject, whether you have degrees, looking at your research output, how many publications, is it in PubMed index journals, citations, and all that kind of a thing, impact factor of the journal in which you have published, and so on. Okay. In some private medical institutions, you might be owning the medical college, so you become the principal or somebody like that, or you are related. So that's one aspect. But we are not looking at other things which the leadership should have: administrative experience, knowledge of financial management, government rules if you are in the government, interest in medical education, should be able to communicate well. How are your communication skills? And you also need to have a good record of good scholarship and personal integrity. We almost never look at personal integrity for the simple reason it's very difficult to find out whether it is true or not. Yes, it is a wish list. Okay, but I believe these are some of the things which we need to look at, which is very important if somebody is to lead a medical institution. So, academic integrity, what is that? If you look at this, one of the definitions which are there, it is the commitment to and demonstration of honest and moral behavior in an academic setting. So there are two aspects to this. There is a commitment, and you have to show, you have to demonstrate honest and moral behavior in an academic setting. It's not enough if you say I am committed to academic integrity. You need to demonstrate that. So if you have unethical leadership, the problem is the leaders can influence others to engage in crimes of obedience. Because generally what happens, people want to, make the leader happy. So if you are unethical, this is what will happen. It leads to declining student and public trust, and he must have intentions, values and behaviors that intend no harm and respect the rights of all parties. This is an ethical leadership, not unethical. So what are the challenges which are faced by leaders of medical institutions? First is, there is a very diverse and changing needs of society. Student, patient, community expectations are increasing day by day. If you see students want not just to do MBBS, they want to see post-graduation, they want to put the least amount of effort. The patients who come, they want to get maximum kind of treatment, they don't want to pay. And similarly, community expectations which say that you need to start more and more medical colleges, you need to have more and more students, more and more new courses and so on. The other issue is the high cost of new interventions, treatment or training facilities. Because we are talking of academic integrity, let me talk of training facilities. The kind of simulators which are available, they run into crores, and maintaining them, you need facilities. After buying them, how will it be used? So the cost factor is extremely high when it comes to even training facilities, things like wet labs and so on. So I remember one faculty member said that we are not able to get students for our MCH course because AIIMS Bhubaneswar does not have robotic surgery. And students are refusing to join because we do not have robotic surgery. So I said, fine, let them not join. Okay. So this kind of a thing where people feel that unless you have this high cutting edge equipment and instruments, students will not join. Increasing litigation, right to information. So a lot of time of leaders go in this. Of course, if you are in a government setup like us, the leader doesn't have to pay for the law or anything like that. Only the person putting the litigation. A lot of time which can be spent in otherwise important activities gets taken up. We are also expected to produce results in a limited time. If you take some of the new AIIMS, they have been established, like we celebrated the 8th Foundation Day yesterday. So from 2012, for the first 2-3 years, there were not even proper buildings, leave alone a good hospital and other facilities. So how can you produce good research in that shorter time? It doesn't happen that way. So if you start comparing, the research output of AIIMS Bhubaneswar to AIIMS New Delhi, which has been there for more than 60 years, it is like comparing apples and oranges. But this is reality. People do compare. And many of the time, we are judged on the quantity and not the quality. How many publications? Okay. That's the whole question, not on the quality. How many students have passed out? NIRF rank, where are you in the NIRF rank? How many new, what courses have you started? So these are the challenges which are faced by leaders of medical education who, in order to manage some of these things, are, I wouldn't say forced to, but try to, sort of fudge the lines or blur the lines between what is black and white. So some problems related to academics in medical education, let's look at it. First thing is training. So we expect high quality training, but is it possible in medicine if you start increasing the number of students to an impossible number like 250? Okay, then you have a hospital with only 1,000 beds, but you want to have increasing number of undergraduate students, increasing number of postgraduates and super specialty students, but the number of beds is not increasing. So if you have surgical oncology, if you are going to have 10 students, but only have 30 beds, that's not going to help the residents at all. You can only say we are having 30. So there's a big mismatch. And they will come out and say that, you are a super specialty hospital, don't do simple normal vaginal deliveries. At the same time, they are having undergraduate students. They are having BSc nursing students who are expected to know how to conduct normal vaginal deliveries. So there is this big problem which is happening. Almost all the academic leaders have to deal with it. Similarly, patient care. Now, even the patients don't want to be seen by, MBBS doctors. They want to have specialty care and if possible, super specialty care. So what is happening? Someone coming with an ordinary migraine has to be seen by a neurologist, not even by the medical people. So this is leading to a lot of, problems when it comes to teaching, because we need these students to be taught in a place where they can have early community exposure, early clinical exposure, at least before this whole COVID crisis happened. So cutting edge technology will help only to a certain extent, and that should not be the mantra by which we think of opening more and more new cases. Similarly, research. I believe research should be reflective of and should have some, some connection with the region in which we are. If you look at Orissa, there is still a lot of malnutrition. There is still a lot of, even things like iron deficiency anemia. But if you are looking at how people look at research, unless you have all this kind of nth generation genome sequencing business and studying some small difference in a very rare cancer, which if you give this therapy, somebody's span by 2 months. If you're looking, because we are judged by the number of extramural grants we have, we are judged by the amount of money we get from extramural grants. And if you look at some of the thrust areas may not be in line with what the region in which we are coming from or our institution is. So there is a lot of issues regarding that. Similarly, financial sustainability. We are supposed to be able to sustain ourselves financially. How can we do that? Because you are only charging 5,000 rupees for a student from first year to final year, and in that even 1,000 rupees has to be returned. That is 5,000 rupees is the amount a student pays when they get into AIIMS. What are they paying when they join IIT or IIMs? So this is another thing. I told you that because of this whole issue, we are not even looking at financial sustainability. There is this constant pressure to keeping on performing. I have told you how we are all the time being compared, and every now and then there is some, some committee or something which is coming almost every 2 weeks. Okay, so we need what some of the people we do is we pretend everything is well, okay, so that there is no questions asked, and but that by itself is trying to erode the way we are. So dishonesty is seen, as you all know, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the kind of fraud and dishonesty which goes in research, in exam practice, the way exams are conducted, patient care, because patient care in a medical academic institution, patient care is part of academics because we have to teach with the patients, we have to teach students how to care for patients. Patient care is a huge part of academics. Again, dishonesty is seen in the way financial dealings are held with procurement, a lot of procurement, even things like consumables. Some private institutions, financial dealings with even the selection of students. Selection of personnel. Again, a lot of dishonesty is seen. And then, of course, the metrics by which we are trying to gauge ourselves. So these are the broad areas in which dishonesty is seen, and I will talk to you about each. So research fraud. You know, a lot of fraud goes into planning, okay, into conducting the research. And in planning, people sometimes borrow from others without proper attribution. People steal other people's projects, and even during conducting, they don't conduct it in the manner in which it has to be done, and so on. Reporting, that means right from authorship issues to plagiarism to fudging data to copying images, and so much has happened. Many times you get caught, sometimes in an international platform in a very bad way, and we all know about what goes on. Then again, in research, the use of funds. You get funds, but you use it for your own personal thing. Sometimes it is used for misused, and so on. Now, research depends a lot on committees. Sometimes at the national level, sometimes at the institutional levels. And committees, many times the people in committees use it as a bargaining tool. Okay, they like somebody, your project is approved without asking questions. If you don't like somebody, you will be asking some trivial questions, and you try to stop it or delay it as far as possible. So this approvals is used as a bargaining tool by many people. And this is something which leaders should try to prevent. Then, of course, manipulating metrics. Because if you are constantly asked how many projects you have and you have very little money, then what happens? Some people simply start reporting even your intramural projects as if it is extramural grant. Or they don't say whether it is extramural, they say these are the research projects. You have 102 research projects. Then some people start reporting that we have non-funded projects. That means they are doing some project which doesn't go through ethics committee, nothing. In their mind only there is a project which they say that they are doing. So all this kind of fraud happens because so much of importance is given when you are looking to promote somebody. Okay? So right from planning, conducting, all this fraud happens. So what can be done by the leadership? One is you need to create a climate of integrity. You need to say this is how we will be, and we will not, fudge our data or fudge the metrics or anything like that. This is who we are, and we will try to improve honestly. This is something which the leadership only can do. Then you have to make it clear that scientific misconduct will not be tolerated. And when I mean scientific misconduct, it means all forms of misconduct. See, we know what is happening if husband and wife are working, are both doctors. Husband, whenever he writes a paper, his wife will be co-author. If the wife writes a paper, husband will be co-author. They may be in two different specialities, but they'll give each other authorship. So that 10 into 2. I can tell you from my own point of view, I have many papers to my credit, so has my husband. We have never co-authored even a single paper. For that matter of fact, I have never co-authored a single paper with either my daughter or my son. So the thing is, this kind of integrity has to come from the leadership. Because the moment you allow it, you will find that, this is totally wrong. When you give co-authorship or gift authorship to your spouse, this cannot be tolerated. The third thing is you can use technology. Technology in the form of plagiarism testing, or for now we have for accounting software for the extramural grant, so that the funds can be easily accounted for. Or you can use technology for for the ethics committee approvals and things like that, so that there is transparency. Everyone knows what has gone on, and there is a kind of climate which you create, which you are saying that you are intolerant of dishonesty. Okay, so use technology; it is available, and we have to spend money to use it. The metrics for promotion should be broad-based. See, what happens is, unfortunately, either in our place we follow some of the Sneh Bhargav committee recommendations or the MCI recommendations. So many papers, only then you can. And you will have people who say, I'm not interested in research, I am only interested in patient. So we need to look at the metrics for promotion should be more broad-based, not just publications. It may be that somebody who is good in hospital is to write a guidelines. Somebody who is a good teacher might introduce a new teaching learning method. Somebody who doesn't like both research or hospital care might want to have a new assessment method for clinics. So there has to be scholarship, because we are going to promote for academics, and this scholarship must be recognized. So it doesn't need to have, no one needs to write only original articles. But at the same time, if you have somebody who's not doing anything, neither patient care nor research nor teaching, and say that I am here and you better promote me, that cannot happen. So the metrics for promotion should be broad-based, so that we prevent fraud from happening. And train. Give as much training as possible. Reinforce at every opportunity that the climate of integrity is essential. This is an example I want to tell you. One of my assistant professors, one of our assistant professors, Dr. Sweta Singh, she presented this poster in I think in South Africa. She had gone and she presented this poster, I think somewhere in 2016 or 2017. And then last year or year before last, she rang up, she had gone to a national conference, and she was so surprised when she saw the very same poster, but with another lady's name. Okay? Richa Rosalind Gandhi, a resident of obstetrics and gynecology from SCB Medical College, Cuttack. The exact same title, exact same thing, only thing is now the logos were different. So she was very, very upset, because then she called me up from that place and she told me, ma'am, this has happened, what should I do? So I told her, first thing is, you please give a letter to the organizing secretary then and there, saying that this should be withdrawn, and give a copy to the scientific committee chairman, which she did. They didn't do anything. Then she told me after a day, nothing has happened. I said, go and remind them. She did. They didn't do anything. Then when she came back, I wrote a letter to the head of the department of obstetrics and gynecology of this college. Nothing happened. Then I sent a reminder. Nothing happened. Then I wrote a letter to the director of medical education. Again, nothing happened. So now what would be my stand? If the next time something like this happens, someone comes and tells me, ma'am, my thing was plagiarized, my thing will be, oh, last time for Sweta also we did this, nothing happened, so just forget it. But it shouldn't be. Just because it didn't work, we cannot give up on integrity. So we need to keep working at it. If somebody didn't take any action, because this is what makes research fraud flourish. Plagiarism flourishes because of the attitude of people who are in positions who do not take any action. Okay? So if you are in a position where you can, if I were in this, if I were the head of the department of that thing, I would have given, I would have made sure that president leaves. Okay? So you have to take action if you are in a position of power. So this is, I think, from Turnitin, when they talk about student plagiarism, this academic integrity cycle is from them. So they talk about, to establish this culture of honesty, what are the things we need? Clearly defined policies and procedures. Most of the time we don't have. Assessment tasks which encourage creativity and originality. We don't know how to set them, frankly. Integrated plagiarism detection strategy, most of us have, but what we don't realize is we think that, putting it in Turnitin or, one of those softwares, and it has detected plagiarism. It doesn't. It only detects how much similarity there is between two articles. That's all it does. Study skills, information literacy, most of us do something, at least we have enough webinars, we ask people to join courses and so on. And then again, this is something we may have on paper, we don't implement. So unless we do these 5 things, or if we do these 5 things, we will be able to promote a culture of honesty. So who are the stakeholders in an examination fraud? Obviously students, because they want to pass. Teachers also. And how do teachers become stakeholders? Because sometimes when you are assessing teachers, you are looking at metrics which are again wrong. You are looking at feedback given by students, and students will say, as long as the teachers pass me, I'm fine. Okay? So how do teachers do this? Actually, this question was asked to me during one of the NTTC programs. One participant told that their institution was going in for this NAAC accreditation. And in NAAC accreditation, you have to get feedback from students. So the students were blackmailing teachers and saying, don't ask difficult questions in the exams. So teachers were lowering the standards of exams so that many students pass and they would get a good feedback. So this is a vicious cycle. There are peers who will go and leak the cases. They will help the residents there. I mean, lot of ways in which there are peers. Some peers even appear in exams. When you are having 250 students, many times you don't know who is writing the exam also. Parents. See, previously there was parents held teachers, and there was a kind of an honor code which parents expected students to have. They would say that doesn't matter if you get 4 marks, but we want you to be honest and true. And these are some of the things which are slowly eroding. Similarly, leadership. Because you want to go out and say, yes, my institution is top 5 of medical colleges. My institution has got this NAAC accreditation. Because these are the metrics. And if 100% of our students are passing, or like what happened this time, All India entrance exam, PG entrance exam, AIIMS Bhubaneswar students stood first. So we like to take the credit for that. And we know, heart of hearts, we know the credit lies with the student. But we'll go out and say that, the credit goes to us. So this, it's not fraud, but I would say it is the truth either. Again, we are blurring the lines between grey and white. And of course, the management. If you are in a private institution, then you know all the kinds of things which go on. Where, because so much of money has exchanged hands, the management just wants the students to pass. They do not want students to fail. So what happens is you are having a course where students know that they will be passed. Okay? So what can be done by the leadership? We need to create clear policies and make sure they are not flouted. And this is easier said than done, because making policies we will make, but then flouting, that is when it becomes difficult to take action. I would suggest if you have more and more formative exams with proper feedback, students realize, early on that sometimes they realize they are not good enough for this course. sometimes they realize how hard they need to study and they will improve. Okay? We also need to stress on quality. If we stress on quality and the leadership can give feedback to the teachers how to improve this quality, it will be a great help. Because it is not enough if you take feedback, if we take the feedback how are teachers performing and all that. We need to give feedback to the teachers about what they can do. And if you are in a leadership position, you can do that. We have done this very easily because at least in the undergraduate exams, we have removed external examination, because I believe that, people go to somebody's college, pass all the students, then invite him here and he comes or he or she comes and they pass all the students. This needs to be stopped. And all stakeholders, we can collect feedback to improve this. Trips, going to temples, going to, so we need to make our policies clear and say that, no, this is not going to happen here. You can have observers who come and correct random papers or who are listening in on a Viva VOC and give their own marks and see whether it matches. We need to check on quality. We have done this in AIIMS Bhubaneswar. We have observers who come in for the undergraduate exams. I agree all observers are not very good, but at least we have an external check on what's going on and about the quality of the examination. We also, as leaders, we need to trust our faculty more. And this is very funny because if you look at postgraduate exams, the head of the department will say that we want external examiners. The head of the departments don't come to me and say, let's have only internal examiners for our postgraduate exams. I don't know why. If you can trust an assistant professor to teach your postgraduates, why can't you trust him to be an examiner? So this is something which we can do, but we are a long way from doing it. We need to conduct more faculty development programs on assessment. And I'm not saying about the fancy parts of assessment, but simple how to improve measures can be taught, how to do assessment. And then this is something which I almost always see. If you have 200 students appearing for an exam, there will be a few who get, the bell-shaped curve, the Gaussian curve. Will have some who are done extremely good so that they will be getting. There will be some who will be failing because they have done very badly. But you have these two standard deviations which are there. I also look for a mismatch between practical and theory marks. Sometimes you will find examiners or internal examiners give 80%, 90% marks in practicals, and the students will get 20% marks in theory, so that they try to make sure that the students pass. So if I see this mismatch, I know that the assessment is not good enough. So there you need to call and ask, why is this happening? And this is something which needs to be done by the leadership. There are other issues. Students' attitude towards cheating is very different. Don't think that students believe cheating is wrong. I have been, in order for this talk, I have been looking up some papers, and there are schools in which students do not believe cheating is wrong. Now, the problem with cheating in medical colleges, they have found those who cheat in their assignments also seen to cheat in patient care. They will tell the consultant that they have done an examination when they have not done. They will write false values for, some biochemistry tests. They will say some sample has been sent for some testing when they haven't sent. So, cheating in the exams also means that they may be cheating in patient care. So, this becomes a very difficult thing for us. Okay? Then, threatening to commit suicide if not passed. This is a recent thing which I am seeing. Parents will ring me up and say, he is my only son and he is threatening to commit suicide, so please pass him. And we have people who will game the system. For example, if you have a final exam and then within 2 months you have a supplementary exam, you will find students are not appearing for the regular one. They are appearing for the supplementary one because they feel that it is easier to pass. So, there are lots of issues to cheating which we can, sort of focus on and take some action. So leadership is not doing everything yourself, but it means that you have to delegate to the right people. So the issue is, who are the right people? Do you have the choice to select the right people if you are a leader? And that's the thing. A first-class leader will always select first-class faculty. I mean, I believe that I need to be surrounded by first-class faculty, because that will show how good we are. But remember, second-class leaders always select third-class faculty because they want to show how good they are. Okay? So this is the thing. If you have a group of faculty who are all the time saying yes and you are so great, you are not doing everything right. So this selection business, you do not have sometimes the right to select whom you want, because lead a solo performance. We have to get others in our team. We have to engage and release their human potential so that we have a common cause. So this person who's conducting these big orchestras, he may have the choice to select all his musicians, but a director doesn't have the choice to select all her faculty. So that's the problem. Okay? So the quality of the selected faculty may not be the director's fault. There is also a tremendous pressure to fulfill all the MCI requirements, to fill up positions. They will say 3 years it has not filled up. Sometimes positions are for reserved category and there will be no candidate. So what happens? We fill up anyway because we don't want to think, okay, something is better than nothing kind of a situation, right? At least it is getting filled. So the other issue is the quality of medical training is falling. I have been sitting in many selection interviews, and I have sat through some interviews for promotion. I can tell you that the quality is definitely falling. The results, the resultant standards are falling. And if anyone is to blame, we are to blame. Okay. We also need to pay more attention to the integrity of a person when we select rather than the number of publications. So this is a kind of leadership model which people can use, where x-axis is the competence, y-axis is the commitment, and you have these 4 quadrants. Okay. So I usually talk about this high competence and high commitment, which is generally seen, I would say example is our JIPMER NTTC group. Okay. At least, I know that when I was there, we had a group which was extremely competent, highly committed. I didn't have to do anything. Simply tell them we want to do this, and then everyone will do everything and will come and go ahead and do it. So that's one group. Then you have this low competence and low commitment. You can almost not get them to do anything, right? Most of us, we forget about this group because it is too much of an effort and energy to get them working. Now this group, low on competence but high commitment. This is what the medical education unit of AIIMS Bhubaneswar was when I took over. They were highly committed, but their competence was low. And with a little bit of telling them what to do, monitoring, organizing, encouraging everything, not necessarily encouraging because they were already highly committed. They became from low competence, they are very quickly going into high competence. So they are moving into this. So this is a group which we all like to work on, okay, because they are highly committed. Because this competence can be taken care of by training. Then you have this. You have people who are highly competent, absolutely no commitment. They just come to get a pay. They don't want to do anything. But because they are highly competent individuals, we need to encourage them, listen and listen. So this is the leadership model which most of us use, and I feel that this is convenient for us to use because it is quite effective. So the problem is that most of the theories of leadership were not developed within an academic or healthcare setting. They were developed for a business setting, and then we applied it to academics or healthcare. So there is very little evidence that this leadership models actually lead to improvement in education or patient care. So, the success of an institution by metrics which actually don't reflect the real progress of it. And those of you who read Simon Sinek will know about this finite game and infinite game, because we are, as leaders, what happens is we play the finite game. We say that, okay, so many 100% of our students passed, or we have this year started so many courses. That's not what we are aiming at. We have to play the infinite game in which the game never ends. So as you reach some goalpost, the goalpost is moved away, and that is the only way we can do it. Because what is happening is, when we play the finite game, we try to cover up our inadequacies by doing one thing. Either we keep everyone happy. Okay, you want to go for a predatory conference? Go. You want to publish in a predatory journal? I will give you 5,000 rupees. You from your LRA. It is all right. You publish. So you can keep everyone happy, but that's not helping anyone. Or the second thing is, you can blame the government and administration and say that, we can't do it because we don't have funds, we don't have that, this and all that. The other issue is, I told you there is a hierarchical leadership. Many directors and deans, they take on positions during the fag end of their career, and so there is a lot of ill health. They have other family commitments. Sometimes they say, I don't want to start what I can't finish. So they deliberately maintain the status quo. They want positions of leadership, but don't want to do anything with that. And therefore, this leads to, stagnation and, whole lot of issues which come in my next slides. It is what is academic leadership. So a lot of things you will know, especially things like lack of vision. There is a failure to lead. We also tend to avoid conflict because we don't want these fights happening. Best way to avoid fights, avoid this conflict is not to do anything. So this is not good for somebody in an academic leadership. Okay. Then we have lack of ethics or character, which is a breeding ground, dishonesty. Sometimes you are inconsistent, showing favoritism, encouraging mediocrity. For me, this is the death of any academic excellence, where you encourage mediocrity. It's okay if you can't publish. It's okay if you can't teach. It's okay if you don't like to. It's all right. Just sit and come, and then every year you expect your increment or whatever it is. This is the whole problem. We also need to hold staff accountable. When things don't go right, we need to ask, why is it not happening? We need to follow through. And these are some of the things which academic leaders need to do in order to prevent, dishonesty in their workplace. So I'm coming to the last two slides. So what can be done by the leadership? One is, we need to promote and foster academic integrity. The very fact we are talking about this means that we cannot allow this to be, sidelined. We need to foster academic integrity at every possible opportunity. We need to implement punitive measures without fear or favor. It doesn't matter. People will write, they will go to court and things like that. It's okay. But we have to show that we are not okay with dishonesty. Use the situational leadership model as much as possible. It works. We need to flatten hierarchies, because this hierarchical structure where the senior most person becomes the head of the department or becomes the dean of something, or it doesn't work. There needs to be a collective group model which we need to bring in, which is what I tried to do with the medical education unit of AIIMS Bhubaneswar, and for me it has worked. People need to undergo training in leadership. Now it's very easy to undergo leadership. Lot of courses are there. We need to get feedback about our own style of functioning also. It is also important for us to establish these oversight boards. We have oversight boards for, let's say, sexual harassment in the workplace. We have a kind of a committee for that. So we need to have a research oversight board, or an office of research integrity or something like that, which is established, which can be done for this. We also need to diversify leadership positions. I don't mean diversify only to ladies. There are very few women in leadership positions in medical institutions, but we also need to diversify in age. We need to diversify by specialities. So we need to diversify leadership positions so that we can get a better all-round, input on the way we can do this. So I'll just end by one of my favorite slides. I hope that those who are in HIMSS Bhubaneswar don't see this, who are below me. And I can say that certainly I don't see my faculty in this manner. So thank you very much for a patient listening, and I will be very happy to take any questions from all of you.
Madam, there are some questions in the chat box.
Yeah. Joseph Philip Raj asks, how easy or difficult to practice in actual situation, whatever you have mentioned about the qualities? Is there a role for? Yeah, so to Joseph Philip Raj, I would say, yes, situational leadership is possible because I have tried it, it works. Is it difficult about the qualities? It is difficult, but it is not impossible. Let me put it that way. So someone has written, I've been a victim of violation of publication ethics. I have not been given as co-investigator. So if you feel that you have done some work and you require to be given co-investigatorship, you will probably need to write to the editor. First you write to the author and tell him that you feel that this should happen, and then you go and say that you want to file an issue with the editor. But let me tell you, most of the time editors will not take it very seriously. So you need to think about it very carefully. Please do not make it a grievance redressal forum. Okay, fine. How to manage non-compliant staff in the department? Okay, how to manage non-compliant staff in the department? See, what happens is, most of the time we tend to grumble that somebody is not working, not doing some work, but we fail to put it in writing. So my thing would be, if there is a non-compliant staff, talk to that staff once, twice, second time you say, third time you're going to do it, I'm going to put it in writing. If you give it in writing, there is some case for us to take action. But if there is nothing in writing, you cannot, because you in a government setting, it is very difficult to take action. Okay. Okay, Amol Dongre, yes, Amol, I'm glad that you came to me. What challenge? Okay, but he has given it privately, but I'll answer this. What challenges do you face as director? What kind of leadership do you believe in to address it? See, as I told you, I am reading a lot on leadership from two people. One is Simon Sinek. I'm a big fan of his. And the other one is Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell doesn't write much about leadership, but there are a lot of things which he writes about which I feel directly addresses leadership. Challenges are many, but I can tell you that it is not something which we can't deal with. The problems will come only if you are very passionate about what you do. For example, if I feel very passionately about the academics. I feel very passionate about, the care which is given to our people, because they are from the background of the patients. First, they come from a very economic background. So if you are very passionate, then you tend to take a lot of things, you start reacting to things very much. So that is one thing. The other challenge which I told you in that leadership model, that situational leadership model, where we have people who are highly skilled people who are very low on commitment. So that is the biggest challenge for me. How to get these highly skilled people Yes, I really don't see. I don't see. Okay. As you mentioned about your residence example, something happened to my residence. Her paper is published again in another journal by someone. How to handle? So again, this plagiarism is becoming a big part. I would say you should write to the person who plagiarized it. You should write to the institution. You should write to the journal. That's the only way we can do. Let me tell you one other thing. I think this Robbins pathology also. One of the Vinay Kumar had written that Robbins pathology. A large chunk of it was plagiarized by somebody from MAMC. Nothing happened. As far as I know, nothing happened. So this is a huge problem because we actually don't train people to write, from their heart or train them to write original stuff. That's the whole problem. Flattening the hierarchies, is there anything which can be done at the administrative level? It's very difficult to do at the administrative level unless these are built into your GBIB. Okay, so some of these things are already there in our rules which says that the senior most person has to be this. There is nothing you can do to flatten hierarchies. But if you have departmental committees which you are making, go ahead and flatten hierarchies. Nothing is preventing you from doing that. Okay. How to overcome the current situation of institutions pressurizing to, I don't know who's pressurizing to give 100% pass at final exams. I am not. And I will never. Okay? And I think most of the people should stop doing that. To expect 100% pass, especially at a postgraduate and super specialty level. I think we should come out from that mode. Otherwise, we are going to be in a big soup. How to motivate? Okay. How to motivate the head of the department or head of the institute? If they need motivation, they should not be either heading the institute or heading the department. Okay. That's what I told you. So when you look at the hierarchical model, this is what happens. Okay. System bureaucrats are supreme. They don't believe in listening. Yeah, so you have to make them listen, right? I don't think there is. If there is anything else, could you please ask me?
Yes, madam. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Actually, your presentation was good. Like many of the things which could be institution to make a very doctors, but the problem is most of the medical colleges in India are under the private medical colleges, and most of them, even in the government medical colleges also, even the IS people and all for the promotions, etc., 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 will be there. So what can be done? Whether it can be made, we cannot make all the medical colleges into autonomous institutions so that one good person can control it. So what is the one practical solution you want to give, madam, to make that, to increase the standard of that medical colleges or the PGs?
Yeah, I'll give you a practical solution, but you will tell me it can't happen. You have to change from within.
Yeah,
see, because ultimately it is we who are part of society, isn't it? See, all the doctors are only teaching there. So you can't say that fellow is taking money, so I will take money. So that doesn't.
As a junior doctors will have a very good, as you come out of as a budding PGs, we'll have a lot of ideas. But as we go towards and all the seniors are going ideas.
Yeah, so I can tell you that, I sort of grew up in JIPMER, and it's not very different for you to find things like that. And I can tell you one thing which happened to me when I was a senior resident. I wanted to take a class on, unethical drug promotion, which is done by the pharmaceutical companies, and I was taking it for some years. So we had this new head of the department who came and he said, no, how can you take this? This has nothing to do with pharmacology. Why should you do it? So that time, what happened was, I spoke to the students That time we had to borrow a VCR player. I had this video, so it was, I remember we had to get 60 rupees. So everybody paid some 1 rupee or something like that. We got this VCR player. We had it in the girls' hostel, the hall, community hall in the girls' hostel. We had it there, and the boys came, and I conducted the class on a Saturday afternoon. And the next, on Monday, the head of the department called me and he said, I heard that you took the class. I said, yes. Sir, you didn't allow me to take the class in the lecture theatre, so I took it in the hostel. So he didn't know what to do. The next year, he allowed me to take the class in the thing. So, you have to be a little bold, and you have to do things if you feel that you are doing things correctly. I don't think you need to be that worried. But I can also tell you, I was lucky because I did all kinds of things. I mean, none of the people, wrote ill about me. My intentions were clear, and I had a vision, and I think I followed through. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Jaiprakash, if there is nothing.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
This is Dr. Philip from Pondicherry, MGMCRI.
Yes,
Now,
Dr. Philip.
Regarding this, leaders are not born but made. Your views on leaders for medical education and academic setup. What do you think? Is it possible or?
No, so I firmly believe leaders are not born. I very firmly believe leaders are not born; they are only made. Because it is the kind of interest you want to show, and it is a kind of your vision, what you want to do with yourself. So I fully believe that that model where leaders are born, that doesn't exist at all. You look at presently, you have this Greta Thunberg. She's just a teenager, but everybody knows that she has taken the whole, environmental fight to another level. She's just a teenager. So, who made her a leader? She made herself a leader. That's it. So, we need leaders are definitely not made, especially in medical education. You really don't need anyone to tell you what to do. You can simply go in and do whatever you want.
Okay, ma'am. Other thing is about these online examinations, especially for postgraduate courses. As a leader, what are your views and how you would like to implement that?
Okay, let me tell you, I have no formal experience in online examinations for postgraduates. So I can't talk from experience or from any kind of knowledge. I really don't know. I can only tell you that in AIIMS Bhubaneswar, we have not done it. And personally, I feel what we need to do is, if you want an examination, we just have an examination with our internal examiners. The faculty will be the examiners. Every department will have more than 4 faculty at least. So easily they can be the examiners, and we go ahead and have. As I told you, why do we distrust or mistrust our faculty so much? If you really do that, videotape the whole examination, so you will know. You will also know if a faculty are passing the exam, the students, and they really don't know anything. So I personally feel that it can be held. It should not be online. We can do it with our own faculty.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I think if there are no questions, I think we can conclude this session, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you on behalf of. Yes.
Yes.
How to know about upcoming webinars from AIIMS?
From AIIMS. Oh, you can talk to, you can put in a email to Saurabh Sarkar. He is the team leader for AIIMS, or you can just, I don't know, you can send me this thing. I will put you on to them. We don't have we have for our own faculty, which we are doing on a weekly basis. We are doing because we are focusing on assessment at the moment. So every week we have one thing. But I think if you
like this,
this is being done by JIPMER. This is being done by JIPMER.
This is done by JIPMER, but I'm asking if whether I could get any notification about AIIMS or STAT.
Hello, madam. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Madam, like just now you told you like can we all make the exams with the internals as the examiners? Madam, internals can there may be any bias, like because they will be teaching for their PGs for the last 3 years, and the PGs will also be knowing what are their favorite questions, etc., etc., etc. So can there be bias so that if the external comes, there will be better means they will not be having that type of bias.
Yeah, so let me answer this question in two ways. One is that someone said that we are being forced to have 100% pass in exams. Okay. Now, I know many of the state medical colleges, there is an unwritten rule that all students have to be passed, especially in postgraduate examinations.
Some colleges.
Yeah, some colleges. If they are failed, there is a huge hue and cry, and the people are made to review their marks. So, therefore, even though you have internal and external examiners, they are passing anyway. So bias is already there. Now you are saying that if they are internal examiners, they will know their favorite questions and all that. If those questions fall into the areas in which you are expected to know, what's wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong with that. That is why I said, if you feel that there would be a problem of quality, then you have one observer. Okay? You can either have an observer who is, coming from another institution, who will only observe. He won't be an examiner. He will observe the manner in which the exam is conducted. Like what we are doing in AIIMS Bhubaneswar now. Our undergraduate exams, we have done away with external examiners. We have only internal examiners, what we call an external exam. That is to maintain standards. So that can be done. So that's what I'm saying. See, we do not want to trust our faculty. Why don't you tell, yes, I know our faculty will be fair. So we don't want to do that, even if it means you are questioning yourself. So I find that very funny. I mean, I don't know, but if I were an internal examiner, I am an assistant professor, I think I will try to be as fair as possible in the way I conduct my exam. So maybe a little bit of training needs to be done. I think, but it can be done.
Be revised.
Pardon?
The guidelines has to be revised, madam. Then that could be a possible one.
So why are you worrying so much about? See, yes, guidelines have to be revised, but in your mind, you need to make that change. And I can tell you that when I announced somewhere that in AIIMS Bhubaneswar we were changing the examination pattern, everyone felt so angry. The reason why, because if you don't call external examiners, you won't be called back. This I scratch your back business doesn't go. And this examination is something everyone wants to put in your annual thing. I have been called as examiner, MD examiner in this place. I have been called as examiner here. I set the question paper here. As if it is some great, Padma Shri we are getting. People want to write that. So you feel very strongly about being called as external examiner, and therefore if we don't call somebody, then they won't call us, kind of a thing. So I think we need to get out of this, examinership mode.
Madam, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Dr. Karthikeyan from Pondicherry.
Yes.
You said that internal examiners can be allowed for an postgraduate examination. So will the MCA allows that? As a basic question from me, will the MCA allows that?
You have to put it up to the MCA and say that in this current COVID crisis, we are not able to get external examiners. and therefore it would be a good thing for us to have all internal examiners. Let the MCI say no. I'm talking from autonomous institution point of view.
Okay.
Let the MCI say no, we won't allow it.
All right. So that is a basic doubt
Yeah.
we have. They may not. That is the reason. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
I think-
Okay. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Jayaprakash.
Ma'am, you
Thanks,
clearly-
Jayaprakash.
You enlightened us with both the concepts of academic learning and academic leadership and academic integrity clearly, ma'am. It was a wonderful learning experience for all of us. I think you also brought out the difference between how a medical institution is different from other scientific institutions, and how a leader of a medical institution is different from a leader of other academic institution. I personally like the challenges you listed the leader of a medical institution face. It shows that it is not easy to be easy to be a leader in a medical institution. So you need a lot of you have to face a lot of challenges, and you also know how to come out of that successfully. So overall, you made us to understand what does it mean to be an academic leader in a medical institution. So that was your message. Your take-home message was very clear, ma'am. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, ma'am. Thank you, and looking forward for more such thing from you. Thank you very much
Thank you.
on behalf of the participant and
Thank
on
you.
behalf of JIPMER, NTTC and Medical Education Department. Thank you.
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jayaprakash.
ma'am, and thank you, sir.
Thank you.